So we started in LA.
You started in LA.
So we started with a little shop. We kind of grew every time we moved. We moved to Corona, got a little focused, and then came back to LA and, in a big way.
Inside West Coast Customs was peak television. The roaring engines, the jaw-dropping custom builds, the celebrity cameos that made you do a double take. But then, poof. One day, it just vanished. No dramatic farewell, no grand finale, no emotional goodbye. It just ended. Now, why this actually went down is nothing like what you expected. We dug deep, and what we found was shocking. You'll want to stay with me till the very end of this video, because what happened in the final days of the show, it might just blow your mind. Let's get into it. The rise of West Coast Customs. When Ryan Friedlinghaus first customized a 1985 Mazda pickup truck at the tender age of 14, he probably didn't imagine that one day he'd be at the helm of one of the most recognizable car customization brands in the world. But that one vehicle, tweaked, tuned, and turned into a head-turner, ended up being more than just a teenage passion project. It got featured in car magazines, and that tiny spark of recognition planted the seed for what would grow into a global empire. So how does a kid go from modding trucks in his backyard to rubbing shoulders with A-list celebrities and turning car fantasies into jaw-dropping realities? That journey began with a humble $5,000 loan. In 1993, armed with nothing but that loan from his grandfather Edward Sifranek and an unshakable determination, Ryan launched West Coast Customs in Orange County, California. At first, the shop specialized in mini truck customizations, a niche market, sure, but one that quickly gained traction. The demand grew faster than anyone could have expected. It didn't take long before the original space became too cramped for the big dreams Ryan had. So naturally, they packed up and moved into a larger facility in Inglewood. That move marked the beginning of a pattern that would repeat itself time and time again. Expansion, reinvention, and elevation. Ever wondered why one of the coolest car shows on TV just vanished? Was it drama, money, or something much deeper? Stick around, because the truth behind Inside West Coast Customs ending will leave you speechless. But what really made West Coast Customs different from every other body shop on the block? It wasn't just about slapping on some flashy rims or repainting cars in wild colors. According to Ryan, the magic lay in their all-in-one approach. While other places might outsource electrical work, audio installations, or paint jobs, WCC did it all under one roof. That gave them a level of control and attention to detail that set them apart. "What's so unique about my shop," Ryan explained, "is we have everything under one roof, so it's really easy for us to micromanage these jobs when they come through." And let's be honest, when you're working on one-of-a-kind vehicles for some of the most famous names on the planet, micromanagement isn't just a perk, it's a necessity. Now, every underdog story has that one pivotal moment that flips the script, and for West Coast Customs, that moment came courtesy of a basketball legend. Imagine this. One day, Shaquille O'Neal hears about a tricked-out dually truck that WCC had worked on. Curious, he decides to swing by and see what the buzz is all about. That visit changed everything. Shaq ended up bringing in his Lincoln Navigator, and just like that, a working relationship began, one that would evolve into a genuine friendship over the years. Shaq was the first big celebrity client that allowed us to build ridiculous things that didn't exist, Ryan later said. And build they did, over 65 cars for the NBA superstar, to be exact. Their kids even grew up together. Shaq didn't just become a loyal customer. He became WCC's unofficial hype man. He spread the word, sang their praises, and soon other celebrities came knocking. Who could resist the shop that made Shaq's outrageous vehicular dreams come true? As Ryan acknowledged, Shaq put the company name out there among celebrities who are willing to spend absurd amounts of money for their work. In a world where word-of-mouth marketing is worth its weight in gold, Shaq's endorsement was like striking oil. That singular connection opened a floodgate of elite clientele, each wanting a taste of the West Coast Customs magic. Even before their iconic run on television, West Coast Customs had already been building a name within the auto world. Their reputation was rooted in their ability to turn the impossible into the unforgettable. Clients came to them not just for custom cars, but for art on wheels. They wanted what no one else had, what no one else could even imagine. People were looking for that piece you can't just go out and buy, Ryan said. That mindset became the soul of the shop's philosophy. If you can dream it, we can build it. By the time 2004 rolled around, the stars had perfectly aligned. With a rock-solid reputation, a client list straight out of a Hollywood Rolodex, and a flair for the dramatic, West Coast Customs became the ideal candidate for the big screen. Enter MTV's Pimp My Ride. Though WCC would later spin off to launch their own show, that initial exposure was like rocket fuel. Overnight, the brand went from a cult favorite among car aficionados to a mainstream pop culture sensation. Ryan's clientele ballooned, and the West Coast Customs name was suddenly being whispered in every corner of the globe. Pimp My Ride, the turning point. When MTV's Pimp My Ride first hit the airwaves in March 2004, it didn't just premiere as another reality TV experiment, it exploded into living rooms with the subtlety of a fireworks show. It was wild, flashy, absurdly entertaining, and unlike anything anyone had seen before. Suddenly, the world knew the name West Coast Customs, and people everywhere started dreaming about transforming their clunkers into nightclub on wheels masterpieces. At the center of it all was Ryan Friedlinghaus, the founder of West Coast Customs, whose car shop became the heart of the show's magic. Hosted by rapper Exhibit, Pimp My Ride took beat-up jalopies and turned them into extravagant, over-the-top custom vehicles, all with a generous dose of hip-hop flair and high-octane energy. But beneath the glittering surface, was everything really as cool and fun as it seemed? Pimp My Ride became a cultural touchstone practically overnight. It ran for 6 dramatic, neon-soaked seasons between 2004 and 2007, with West Coast Customs managing the jaw-dropping makeovers for the first 4. The show didn't just attract eyeballs, it launched WCC into an entirely different stratosphere of fame. One moment, Ryan and his team were known mostly within car circles. The next, they were international celebrities with their own catchphrases, memes, and fan base. People started flocking to them not just for great work, but for that over-the-top, TV glamorous transformation that made even the rustiest ride look like a showpiece at SEMA. Thanks to the massive visibility, Friedlinghaus's shop wasn't just busy, it became a multi-million-dollar business. Can you imagine going from your local garage to global icon status in a matter of months? And with that popularity came a wave of unexpected opportunities. The West Coast Customs brand was suddenly everywhere. Not only were they getting more TV work and high-profile celebrity clients, but they were also appearing in places no one would have guessed. Like a video game, for instance. In 2005, the street racing game LA Rush featured West Coast Customs as the in-game shop where players would go to upgrade their vehicles. From digital garages to partnerships with powerhouses like Nintendo and Mattel, Friedlinghaus and his team had expanded way beyond the auto world. They had become pop culture icons. But in the middle of all this success, a question started to bubble beneath the surface. How real was the reality in this reality show? The answer, it turns out, was a bit complicated and not always flattering. Behind the scenes, Pimp My Ride wasn't all smiles, chrome rims, and blaring subwoofers. A lot of what fans saw on TV had been heavily staged or dramatized to keep viewers hooked. Producers would go to great lengths to make the before cars look far worse than they really were. Why just show a car with a little chipped paint when you can splash some aircraft remover on it and make it look like a rolling horror movie prop? Or better yet, just rip off a dangling bumper altogether for dramatic effect. One might ask, was the drama necessary? Or was the show trying to fix problems that never existed just for the spectacle? Then there was the matter of the actual car work. For a show that promised complete car overhauls, it's surprising and honestly disappointing how little attention was paid to the stuff that actually made a car run. Most of the upgrades were purely cosmetic. So while a car might leave the garage with a cotton candy machine in the trunk and 6 flat screens stitched into the headrests, it might still struggle to make it down the block. One contestant, Seth Martino, famously described his revamped ride as a polished turd. Think about that for a second. Imagine getting your dream makeover, only to discover your car still leaks oil, the engine stutters, and the brakes squeal louder than the speakers. The pressure behind the scenes was also no joke. Workers were under intense deadlines, with cars arriving on a Monday and expected to be fully tricked out by Friday. That meant 12-hour workdays, high stress, and a race against the clock atmosphere that probably didn't do much for creativity or quality. And who was doing all that heavy lifting? According to some reports, a significant portion of the manual labor was performed by undocumented workers from Mexico, about 11 of them in fact. It raises an uncomfortable question. Was the glitz and glamour of the show built in part on the backs of people who weren't even legally protected or fairly credited? And let's not forget the contestants. Viewers saw them lose their minds in delight as Exhibit revealed their transformed rides. But those reactions, too, were often staged or forced. Take Jake Glazier, for example. He recalled being pulled aside after his underwhelming reaction to the big reveal. Big Dane, one of the production guys, put his arm around Jake and told him to basically fake it better. We expect you to be a little more fucking enthusiastic. Makes you wonder how many of those excited squeals were genuine and how many were simply good acting under pressure. Well, that moment wasn't just a fluke, it was a sign of things to come. Because, as you'll soon find out, inside West Coast Customs wasn't just tweaking emotions, they were shifting gears completely. So don't let go anywhere, because what happened next changed everything about the show and the brand forever. Inside West Coast Customs, a new direction. After Ryan Friedlinghaus stepped away from the high-octane, over-the-top chaos of MTV's Pimp My Ride in 2007, it was clear he wasn't planning to disappear from our screens anytime soon. In fact, he dove straight into a new vision with remarkable speed. Reports said he quickly struck deals with Discovery Channel and the Learning Channel to launch a fresh show called Street Customs. But unlike his previous ride on television, this wasn't about flashy theatrics or dramatic reveals. This was something much more personal. And in Ryan's own words, it was about building cars on TV, not for TV. And really, when you think about it, doesn't that say it all? This wasn't just a new show. It was practically a manifesto, a declaration that things were going to be different this time around. The big idea behind Street Customs was as simple as it was refreshing: to show the actual work happening behind the garage doors of West Coast Customs, minus the made-for-TV drama. Instead of TV producers handpicking junkyard-bound clunkers to be transformed for wow factor, this show followed real customers, people who actually brought their vehicles in and paid for WCC's famously wild customization services. And that authenticity? It hit differently. Viewers weren't just being entertained, they were being let in. They got to watch the real work, from the first brainstorming session with a client to the final clear coat. According to industry insiders, this was the kind of show Ryan and his crew had always wanted to make. One observer even said, "This is the show that the guys wanted to make from the beginning." And it made sense. The format kept the casual, accessible vibe that Pimp My Ride had become known for, but it added something more: real substance. Each episode brought the audience into the nuts and bolts of the craft. You'd see Ryan taking a call about a new project, and then, bam, the cameras would roll as the team dove into planning, design, fabrication, and finally, delivery. It was real-life problem-solving, creative hustle, and good old-fashioned elbow grease, all wrapped into one. But let's be honest, television is television, and even the most sincere concept isn't immune to a little spectacle. Even with a stronger focus on authenticity, West Coast Customs still pulled in some jaw-dropping celebrity clientele. Ryan's team ended up building cars for big names like Carroll Shelby, basketball legend Shaquille O'Neal, who, believe it or not, reportedly had over 30 cars built by WCC by mid-2007, Justin Bieber, and even a mysterious royal from Dubai. The cameras might not have been selecting the cars anymore, but the star power definitely helped fuel the intrigue. Of course, not every headline that came out of the new show was a good one. In 2012, Ryan and will.i.am cooked up a bizarre publicity stunt that involved pretending one of WCC's custom cars had been stolen. For a moment, it grabbed attention, but not for the right reasons. The act was quickly exposed as fake, and critics didn't hold back. One journalist even called it a very bad publicity stunt. So while Ryan may have wanted to distance himself from the MTV-era flash, the spotlight still had a way of dragging drama back in. Then came the wave of changes. After its initial seasons, Street Customs was rebranded as Inside West Coast Customs and moved to Discovery HD Theater, which eventually became known as Velocity. But just when fans had gotten used to the name and the new vibe, another shift happened. In June 2013, Fox Sports Network took over production, dropped the word "inside" from the title, and began broadcasting the show to more than 70 million homes. That's a huge audience, but did the show change with it? The short answer? Yes, but not entirely for the better. The show's basic formula, start with a car, finish with a jaw-dropping custom build, remained intact, but over time, there was a noticeable shift in who the clients were. More and more, WCC began catering to big brands and corporate partnerships. And while that probably made great business sense, it didn't always make for the most riveting television. One particularly snarky reviewer even joked, "If you played a drinking game where you took a shot every time they mention a brand, you'd die of alcohol poisoning before they even get to the paint job." Ouch! Still, the show soldiered on. It lasted for a total of 8 seasons and managed to jump between networks with surprising agility. Eventually, it found a final home on Motor Trend Network, which seemed like a fitting place for a show all about automotive dreams. But Ryan wasn't just content with TV success. He had his eyes on the globe. While filming continued, he began expanding West Coast Customs internationally. Shops opened in Berlin, though that one shut its doors within a year, Mexico, which enjoyed 6 successful years, Dubai, and even Shanghai. His vision wasn't just about cars anymore. It was about turning WCC into a worldwide brand. So, what does this all tell us about Ryan Friedlinghaus? If anything, it shows that he was never just the guy from Pimp My Ride. He was a man with a vision, constantly reinventing, recalibrating, and reaching for the next level, even if the ride got a little bumpy now and then. Sure, some people might say the show lost its magic when it started spotlighting big brands instead of individual car lovers. Others might say it finally matured into what it was always meant to be: a true behind-the-scenes look at the custom car industry. Either way, one thing is certain: Ryan didn't just ride the wave of automotive TV. He helped build the road. What went wrong behind the scenes? Underneath all the flashy paint jobs, celebrity shout-outs, and reality TV drama that made West Coast Customs a household name, a much less glamorous truth was brewing behind the scenes, one that would eventually play a major role in the show's quiet downfall. While viewers at home were glued to the screen watching souped-up cars roll out of the shop with roaring engines and candy-colored finishes, many of the employees building those dream machines were struggling to make ends meet, working long hours under less than ideal conditions. What really went wrong at West Coast Customs? And how could a business that seemed to have everything, fame, clients, and a steady TV gig, begin to unravel from within? According to reports, a turning point came in 2014 when the United States Department of Labor decided to take a closer look at how the company was treating its workers. What they found was deeply troubling. Investigators discovered that West Coast Customs had been violating the Fair Labor Standards Act by paying employees flat weekly salaries, regardless of how many hours they worked. Sounds like a good deal at first, right? Except for the part where some workers were putting in 60-hour weeks and effectively earning around $6 an hour, less than the minimum wage not only federally, but also in California, where the cost of living is anything but cheap. And that wasn't the end of it. Until 2011, the company had also misclassified many of its workers as independent contractors. Why would a company do that, you might ask? Well, that kind of setup conveniently avoids having to pay overtime or guarantee basic wage protections. When it all came to light, Ryan Friedlinghaus, the company's CEO and face of the brand, didn't fight the findings. Instead, he chose to settle. He agreed to pay over $157,000 in back wages to 45 employees and an additional $16,830 in civil penalties. That kind of payout might not seem like much for a company with a hit TV show, but the reputational damage was already done. And if there was one project that symbolized just how badly things could go, it was the infamous Firefall bus build for Red 5 Studios. It was supposed to be a showstopper, a centerpiece at the 2012 Electronics Entertainment Expo. But by the time it was finally delivered, it was not only late and over budget, but also missing key features the client had asked for. The bus never made its intended debut. All that time, energy, and money down the drain. And for West Coast Customs, that high-profile blunder sent a message to clients and fans alike. Maybe the shop wasn't all it was cracked up to be. But perhaps the most heartbreaking part of this story is what was happening to the people behind the scenes. The fabricators, painters, and designers who made the magic happen. Working at West Coast Customs wasn't just demanding, it was draining. Employees reportedly worked 10 to 12-hour days, 6 days a week. Think about that for a second. That's practically living at work. Ryan Friedlinghaus, the boss himself, once openly said that he never wanted to hear employees ask when they could go home. That kind of mindset might sound like tough love to some, but for many on the team, it meant missed birthdays, strained relationships, and sheer exhaustion. Mauricio Hernandez, a former employee, once shared how he felt like he missed out on his children's entire childhood because he was constantly at the shop. Is chasing success worth that kind of personal sacrifice? Ironically, the very hustle culture that powered the show's early rise also planted the seeds of its downfall. Sure, the long hours and relentless push for perfection helped produce some jaw-dropping rides and TV moments. But behind the cameras, it created an environment where burnout ran rampant, turnover soared, and trust quietly eroded. And when you add labor violations, disappointed customers, and missed deadlines into the mix, you start to see a clearer picture. West Coast Customs didn't crash overnight. It ran out of gas slowly, one misstep at a time. But here's the thing. Everything we've talked about so far, that wasn't even the worst of it. If you think you've seen the breaking point, trust me, you haven't. What happened next was the final, brutal blow. And you're going to want to sit tight for this part because it changes everything. The final blow. In the world of custom car builds and high-octane entertainment, inside West Coast Customs once stood as a symbol of style, swagger, and jaw-dropping vehicle transformations. But behind the flashy paint jobs and celebrity cameos, there were cracks in the foundation that couldn't be hidden forever. Over time, several major missteps slowly chipped away at the brand's credibility. And in the end, those failures weren't just bumps in the road, they were the reason the engine stopped running for good. One of the most damaging and unforgettable blunders was the infamous Firefall bus project. Back in 2012, Red 5 Studios had big dreams. They wanted a custom mobile gaming bus to promote their new video game, Firefall. The bus wasn't just supposed to drive around looking cool, it was designed to be a next-level promotional tool, equipped with hydraulic expansion features so people could step inside and play in real-time LAN competitions. A project like that, with a $3 million budget, could have been a turning point for West Coast Customs. But instead, it turned into a cautionary tale. Why? Because everything that could go wrong seemingly did. First off, the project ran massively over budget. That's never a good look, especially when millions are involved. But even worse, West Coast Customs delivered the bus extremely late. So late, in fact, that it completely missed a prime window of opportunity, the 2012 Electronics Entertainment Expo. Imagine spending millions on a marketing tool only for it to arrive too late to be useful. Red 5 Studios' CEO at the time, Mark Kern, didn't hold back. He publicly criticized WCC for failing to deliver on their promises, and the criticism didn't stop at a few angry tweets. The bus arrived missing vital safety features and didn't function the way it was meant to. According to industry reports, it ended up parked in a warehouse somewhere, gathering dust like a monument to everything that went wrong. And here's the kicker. The fallout from that project was so severe that Kern was eventually ousted as CEO, with the failed bus build cited as one of the contributing factors. If one project could cause that kind of ripple effect, what did it say about West Coast Customs' reliability? But that wasn't the only sign that things were off track. Around the same time, the company was trying to take its brand global. It seemed like a bold move. Who wouldn't want to see a West Coast Customs shop in Berlin, Tokyo, or Mexico City? They opened a flashy location in Berlin in September 2008, only for it to declare insolvency less than a year later. It was like lighting a sparkler that fizzled out in seconds. Other franchise attempts, like the ones announced in Russia, Japan, and Malaysia, never moved beyond flashy press releases and pretty websites. There were no builds, no clients, no real presence, just ghost towns with logos. And the trouble didn't end there. The Mexican franchise, which initially showed promise, eventually dropped the West Coast Customs name altogether in 2017. Why? Well, reports suggested that the owner wanted to distance himself from Ryan Friedlinghaus, the founder of WCC, who was facing serious criticism at the time, specifically rumors about how he treated undocumented workers. When a franchise no longer wants to be associated with the parent brand, that's a glaring red flag. It tells you there's more going wrong behind the scenes than anyone's willing to admit out loud. Now, what about the show itself? Inside West Coast Customs aired its final episode on April 10, 2018. There was no grand farewell, no tearful goodbye, no dramatic season-ending cliffhanger. It just ended. This was surprising to many viewers because the show had just returned to the Velocity network the year before and had even been renewed in early 2018. But behind the scenes, the writing was already on the wall. Insiders in the TV industry began to whisper that the show was becoming harder and harder to justify. Ratings were sliding. The buzz just wasn't there anymore. And with the company itself wrapped up in controversy and failed ventures, it didn't exactly make for great TV. Gone were the days when celebrities were lining up for a one-of-a-kind West Coast Customs makeover. And let's not forget the network bouncing. From Discovery HD Theater to TLC, to Fox Sports to Velocity, the show couldn't seem to find a stable home. Each move felt like a desperate attempt to stay alive. But it also signaled to viewers and investors alike that the show was running out of road. Every time the network changed, it was like a silent admission that something wasn't working. So, when you piece it all together, the failed $3 million bus that never quite rolled out the way it was supposed to, the international branches that disappeared almost as quickly as they launched, the swirling rumors and controversies, the shift away from star-studded car builds, and the eventual silence from the networks, you start to see why Inside West Coast Customs came to a screeching halt. It wasn't just one big mistake that ended the show. It was a slow buildup of poor decisions, missed deadlines, and fading relevance. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.